Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, an island show that endeavors to bring you interesting stories from our local perspective, from around British Columbia, Canada, the wide world. I'm Robin Adair, and with me is the Croatian sensation, once again, my co-host with the most, the Modric of Saanich, John Jurisic. And John, so many things to talk about, and big congratulations go to BC Healthcare Matters and all the work they've done over this last year, because finally it looks like some breakthroughs with the doctors.
Huge congratulations, Robin, to the BC Healthcare Matters and Camille Curry. They have been doing some unbelievable advocacy, and thousands of British Columbians have supported the drive to improve medical services and get more people family doctors. I was at a meeting this morning in which an elderly fellow, my age, so I'm elderly, indicated how he had been to the doctor this past week. And then he goes, finally, I found one. And that man was younger than my youngest daughter, is 32 years old. So, things are working. We're starting to match people with doctors. It's still, however, unacceptable that 1 million British Columbians and millions of other Canadians don't have a family physician. Well, in BC at least, the government blinked.
Absolutely, John, and it's really good to see this. The province has offered a generous package to 14,000 doctors plus who operate in British Columbia, and they've accepted the new master agreement by a whopping 94%. And the new payment model ensures that family doctors with full service practices are paid the same as doctors in hospitals. This new agreement takes effect in January 31st this coming year, and an earlier interim agreement for family docs is also in place. So there's things moving. It's not going to instantly solve the problem, but there's things moving. Saanich physician Dr. Jennifer Lush, who's been on the Rumble Room a couple of times, says this is a better deal and shows that doctors and patients joint advocacy has really paid off. She's talking about BC Healthcare Matters there. Again, hats off to Camille Curry and her team for doing so much hard work. And John, there are, however, still unhappy people out there that we can talk about.
Well, there certainly is. And it depends, how one looks at life, whether the cup's half full or empty. And when your lifestyle is impacted, the cup is half empty. The anti-vax and anti-mandate people are not impressed with all of this talk of boosting salaries and getting more foreign doctors into BC offices. They want all medical people let go during the pandemic to get their jobs back. You may recall a few doctors and nurses refused vaccinations and were not given hospital or home care access. Will this be revisited? Stay tuned. We'll certainly be reporting on it. However, some of our viewers, or a ton of our viewers, in fact, have a thing or two to say about Premier Eby and his medical strategy. Vera writes, this is great, mouth is moving and nothing is coming out. Hire back all the medical staff you let go.
And Sharon obviously doesn't believe very much in the legitimacy of getting vaccinations. She doesn't believe that that's a good strategy, even though the vast majority of Canadians have chosen to get their shots for immunization against COVID-19. However, she says, what a crock. Put our doctors back to work that you fired for refusing to get the jab. Your power and dictatorship rap will not work.
And Shannon, as opposed to Sharon, writes, yes, there's a theme here. Maybe he should lift the ridiculous mandate and hire back medical professionals who were fired. And again, we always welcome feedback, and frankly, we get a ton of it now. This is simply a drop in the bucket, and very happy to share. I actually don't know what will happen to doctors and nurses who refuse to get vaccinated. I don't know how this is going to be solved. Will they ever be allowed back? Because I can see both sides, to some degree. Certainly at the height of the pandemic, at the height of it, there was little patience for their action. We were all under fire, weren't we? But maybe as the mandates recede, there will be a second look at this issue. Anyway, Robin, let's change the topic. Christmas is just around the corner.
It is, John. By all means, let's change the topic. We hear that business is brisk downtown as people are out shopping, and they're enthusiastic with holiday spirit after a few years of COVID restrictions. Who can blame people for wanting to get out and enjoy everything? And we have been seeing some very successful events downtown. We had the Santa Parade, equally well-attended parade of trucks went through the streets of Greater Victoria at various locations. Beautiful festival of lights and Christmas trees at the Bay Center and Empress Hotel, and the beautiful Lights of Wonder display also underway, and it's just starting to get underway this week.
You know, Robin, I'm definitely a big fan of Christmas. People at least, you know, appear to be very happy and appear to be wanting to party and celebrate, be with family. But I also know, as I think we likely all do, that this can be a very hard time of year for a lot of people. People are dealing with hardships, illness, death, and depression. These are major issues at this time of year, and they're really never really brought up. They're never really exposed to talk more about this. We're very lucky to have the fire chief from Esquimalt, Steve Serbic, joining us. He's the author of The Unbroken, a firefighter's memoir, fantastic book about his own struggles with depression. You know, Robin, that 96% of calls made by firefighters are for medical calls? I had no idea. And many of these are people with mental illnesses. Steve has seen a lot, and he has a lot to share with us about this hidden illness in our society. Let's zoom him in.
Now, joining us in the Victoria Rumble Room for the first time is the fire chief from Esquimalt Fire Department, Steve Serbic. Steve, great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, John, for connecting us. And I'm happy to be here.
Now, Steve, you've written a book called Unbroken, a firefighter's memoir, and you dig deep into your own past depression on the job and describe, tremendous stress that all first responders can face on the job. And you talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. You talk about deep depression, even suicide that you've experienced in your career. Now, lots of people feel stress, especially at this time of the year with the Christmas lights and all the blaring horns about what a wonderful time of the year it is. What is your message fundamentally to people who are feeling low right now?
I would say that it's okay. I tell people that are struggling that reach out. I'm on a mental health task force as well for fire chiefs, and when they're struggling and they're down low, especially around this time, I just tell them it's okay. And I don't tell them it's gonna be okay. I don't ever say that because I don't know that. And I think when people struggle, they're usually in a shame hole. They're feeling sad and depressed, and I just let them know that's okay to feel that way.
Steve, thanks for joining us today on what I think's a fascinating subject, one that is always sort of under the covers a little bit. It's there probably much more than we think. So great to talk to you about this. So many jobs in our society today are very stressful, but there's no question that the firefighters, the police, the health workers, and other first responders experience a ton of terrible situations and scenarios that most of us can hardly imagine. On the other hand, stereotypically, people in your line of work, the first responders, project a confidence and strength that we all are so assured by. But I'm betting that being tough, or at least portraying that being tough, doesn't buy you a pass when you witness terrible things on the job.
John, I was that guy of stoicism, and I looked at firefighters probably 10 years into my career that were struggling. You could clearly see it as being weak. That was me through my eyes looking. And I was an avid lacrosse player and hockey player 3-4 times a week, and an avid drinker. I had a great life, beautiful wife, healthy kids. And then everything changed all in one day. And Robin, the book's called The Unbroken. I consider myself one of the unbroken, but I certainly broke there for a while. And and as you asked, what do I say to people about, when they're struggling? I tell them it's going to be okay, but I also tell them it's going to be a lot of work getting better and getting out of the place that they're in. It took me a year in clinical counseling to, figure out what was going on, but I never saw it coming. I could barely move when it hit me, and it hit me in a matter of days when my daughter was sick, and I happened to go to a few calls that made me relate directly to my daughter, which is quite common with the psychological injury. But I had multiple psychological injuries in a matter of 1 week while I thought my daughter was dying in the hospital. So what happens to a first responder is the stoicism, John, what you talked about. We are stoic. We work in a culture where we're supposed to look tough and we're not supposed to show weakness. Well, maybe 10 years ago we weren't. Now it's okay. You have a fire chief out here talking about, his issues with mental health and depression. Times have changed. And I'm one of those people that are for keeping the conversation going. And I'm one of those people that are available if people are struggling and telling them it's okay. So I think that's the thing that's changed. And it's probably been the last 5 years where you've really seen actors and athletes come out and talk about mental health. And it's made everybody who's struggling quietly, like you talked about, that nobody knows, or what is happening to me. You start to relate to someone at a higher level. So an athlete, who's struggling, you feel better just because you see someone else struggling. The conversation is important.
It's interesting you mention athletes, because I actually met you at a golf tournament that was sponsored by the Courtnall brothers. There's depression in the Courtnall family, and it's been a very, very tough thing on that group. But they've done a lot by putting their problems out to the community and sharing. And then they invite you to be there to actually sign some books and talk to people. I believe you were on the first hole and meeting people as they were playing golf through. It was a best ball tournament. And what I wanted to ask you about is, when people are facing depression, often, and in your case, in the book, you were talking about you hit a wall and you finally had to get something done. Does it really always take that? Do you really have to break before you'll finally get some help?
Well, I would say in the frontline workers, doctors, nurses, first responders, usually it does. And if you look, like, people will say I'm a mental health advocate. I'm an advocate of people that are still doing their jobs and they're doing it, but they're struggling. And when someone takes a knee, Robin, it's almost too late. The average mental health claim with WorkSafe is $180,000. That's the average. Some are 50, but some are 300. My thing that I do is I try and expose that there are people out here, police officers and firefighters and paramedicine. Look at what's happening to paramedicine in this province. But there are people out there who are struggling that are doing that job every day. How do we support them so that they don't take a knee? And I think that's where we got to start focusing. Right now, WorkSafe waits until someone takes a knee. It's too late. It's too late. I was taking a knee, and if there weren't firefighters that came into my life like I do now, for other people, I might have broken and I might have never returned to work. But I didn't. And I had support, and I had a wife who understood what I was going through. And that partner piece is the missing piece for people that are struggling. And in the fire service, police service, we forget about the partner, right? So the partner doesn't sometimes understand what's going on. So now we've totally started to change that over the last couple of years, how we really include the partners in what's happening in the fire service. We just had a really bad call a couple of weeks ago, really bad. I talked to the crews. I gave them handouts to give to their partners. What your spouse might go through over the next week. Look for these signs. Call us if you need help. Did a check-in on them. That's called peer support. And you know what? So the partners are involved. And I think we don't want people to take a knee. We want to support the people that are out there doing the job. Like, you hear the words, defund the police. Hey, how about we support the police? How about we help the people that are doing the jobs? And so they don't take a knee. So they don't cost us $200,000 a year. I don't know. That's my focus. That's my mission.
Esquimalt's very lucky to have someone with so much understanding, and that you've gotten through to the other side, so to speak. Steve, I've read that anxiety and stress can sometimes be learned responses from childhood. In other words, you need to reach back into your past potentially to solve these issues and learn where the negative thoughts began and how to turn them off or manage them. I expect this is really tough work, opening one's heart and soul, even with the help of a therapist.
Yeah, it's really hard. And in fact, most first responders want to become helpers for some reason, for something that happened in their life. They want to become helpers and make a difference. And certainly in my case, and I know so many people who had bouts of adversity in their childhood, and they become first responders. I know a police officer who was bullied through high school, and the only reason he became a police officer so he could go back and arrest that bully. And he became an amazing inspector in a police department, but it's not uncommon. So, you know, Robin, you mentioned I wrote a book. I wrote a book and I published it when I was an operations chief in the City of Surrey Fire Department. And I was terrified of pushing publish, to be honest, because I held a position that was respected. I'm not saying I'm respected, but the position I held was very respected in one of the busiest fire departments in the country. And that book was very personal. I mean, I argued with the editor that I wanted to remove some parts, and she said, nobody wants to read a watered down memoir, Steve. And so I did it, but I was terrified to do it. But I never got one bit of negative, no negative. I got hundreds and hundreds of positive feedbacks and emails and things through my LinkedIn account. It was amazing. Like, and you talked about the Courtnall brothers where we met, you know, what they've done about mental health and the tragedy that they've been through is beautiful. Like, they have built a foundation and put their own energy in it and hired people to make a difference and raise funds. It's nice to support groups like that. It feels good. Like, for me personally, it's therapeutic.
Speaking of therapeutic, I mean, I think about our viewership. A lot of people are people that are staying at home right now for the holidays. Maybe they're just mothers looking after children, or they're people, not that say that's an important job, but they work in government, or they're in high tech. But there's stress in so many different aspects of our society. I mean, you can point to firefighters or policemen and say, well, that's a high stress job, or maybe a job working in government where you're getting pilloried all the time. That would be stressful. But I think sometimes we undervalue how much stress there is just in living this world, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with seeking help. You shouldn't devalue yourself and say, well, I shouldn't be getting help. I mean, all I do is raise a family, or all I do is go to an office. If it's affecting you in a negative way, you've got to recognize it that way.
It's so courageous to reach out. I mean, you know, change is hard. And when you're stuck in a rut and you've been, regardless of what career you're in, or maybe you're unemployed and you're feeling awful, change is hard. And whether it means I just need to get outside and start walking around and believing in myself again, or change is hard. But one of the most courageous things you can do, whether it be just call the crisis line. I mean, there's a crisis line available to help people. It's amazing. I have walked many first responders and a couple personal friends where all I've done is called the crisis line and passed the phone to them. And it's made a massive difference in how they felt. And change is hard, Robin. You know what? When you are in a shame hole and you are struggling, and especially if you're by yourself, especially at this time of the year, it's hard, but you can do it. And reaching out for help is courageous. It's one of the most courageous things you can do.
Steve, in your book, I understand there's a chapter where you and other Canadian firefighters traveled to New York right after the Twin Towers came down in 9/11. In regards to managing stress in a crisis like that, what did you learn from that experience?
Well, we had no idea why we were going there. I mean, Cathay Pacific was nice enough to have a 747 waiting at Vancouver International, and we could just go down in our Giuliani asked that we wore our tunics, our dress uniforms, because the people of New York were afraid. They were living in fear. And what he did was when I was there was 10,000 firefighters a day in full uniform walking the streets anywhere in New York. People started to feel safer. You'd go into a bar, you'd go to a restaurant. They were everywhere. People just started to feel safer. Like you can see behind me, I have a picture by a Vancouver firefighter, Jim Nedlack, and he went, and it's of a captain holding a helmet And he was with his crew when the building collapsed, and then they were gone. And all he got was his friend's helmet. He stayed there for days trying to find him. And that drawing, Jim Nedelec, he's an artist, accomplished artist. He made 911 of them. And he put one in every fire hall in New York, and the rest were sold out in a day. And I got one of them because I went. And I learned that life can change in an instant. I learned that walking through 2 feet of soot into a hole where people are digging out their buddies with their hands, and you stand there and salute, and that's a proud moment that, man, sometimes you can't figure out what's really happening in this world. I mean, I went there, I'm still in shock from that event. I talk in high schools, kids now don't even know what that event was. I didn't get to ride on any rigs. Lots of people did because they were short of firefighters. We just attended funerals. We went there and I had no idea what we were going to do. We just went to funeral after funeral after funeral. And yeah, I remember once standing in a church, and I have a really bad back, and we were going in, and there was about 10,000 people in this service, and they were all getting into the church, and I got stopped right on the stairs. And I just, after about half an hour, I could feel my back spasming. And I went, oh my gosh, to a bunch of Canadian firefighters I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And a New York firefighter in front of me turned around and said, and I was there on week 3. He turned around and he said, this is my 27th funeral service. I never said a word, and I stood there and my back pain didn't bother me, right? That department, all of us, you want to do this bravado job, but I never once went to work thinking I was going to die. Never, right? They dropped rookies off on the way to those calls because they didn't want them to die. They wrote social insurance numbers on their arms. A lot of people knew they were going to something really bad. And you know what? I've never thought that way in my career. And I started in 1990. Never once been worried about dying on the job. And maybe that's, ignorance but I just never felt that way. And that was the first time when I went there that I felt very humbled that 343 firefighters and lots of other first responders and civilians could be gone in an instant. So John, I think it taught me that life can change in a second.
And maybe a final word to our viewers, people watching this. This is running during our Christmas season. It's our Christmas offering to people as they prepare for the holidays with family and friends. But maybe they're sitting at home right now, feeling low. Maybe your Christmas message to them, Steve, as we sign off here.
Well, I would like them to know that people care, and I can talk about my department and many departments. When we go to a bad call, we have a second responder program where we go back, and we'll go back with a card and maybe a note. And you might be struggling, you might feel alone, but people do care out there. And in Esquimalt, there's the neighborhood house. Why don't you go down there and have a cup of coffee and meet some people? Why go for a walk, get out there. I just want you to know that reaching out for help is courageous, and there are people out there that care. Merry Christmas to you and your families.
So great to have Steve Serbic on the program. And really talk about how we can cope and manage with some of these feelings that we hide and suppress. As he says, if you're feeling low over the holidays, reach out. Please reach out, and you'll find people that are ready to help you.
Absolutely, Johnny. I keep talking to people that have arrived in Victoria from places like Calgary or even Winnipeg or Regina, where they're used to cold winters, but bright blue skies and lots of sunshine, and they move out here. And I grew up on the Lower Mainland. I grew up where it rained a lot more than it does on southern Vancouver Island. And I moved here and I thought, this is fantastic. But I know people who very much get the blues in the wintertime here because it seems so dark and it's so gray, and people get very depressed with it. And then on top of it, they're told this is the time to celebrate all the twinkle lights, get out there, it's the happiest time of the year. And I think it makes people feel even worse. So thank goodness for people like Steve Serbic getting out there and getting the good word out. And I really want to encourage everyone to try in their own way to celebrate and enjoy the holidays in any way or tradition that they feel comfortable in. And I also encourage you to next week, join us again in the Rumble Room as we run highlights of our past year, 2022, some of the not more interesting guests, but some of the interesting highlights of the year, I guess. We had so many great guests in 2022. We're going to do a sort of a a cross section, and you'll have a chance to sort of get a flavor of what the year was like. And we hope you join us for that. But on that happy note, John, time to say goodbye.
Absolutely. This has been such a great show. I've really appreciated what Steve has had to say, and how some of us can cope better with the holidays. If you don't watch our show, and there's not many people left that aren't watching the show, but if you don't watch the show, watch the one next week, in which we do summarize the year with fantastic clips and guest reviews. I'm looking forward to, I'm in it, but I'm looking forward to watching it myself and just saying, wow, I remember that. Remember that happened in March, and remember that in the, wow.
I think Santa makes a cameo, doesn't he?
Santa makes a cameo. And I'm really excited about that, and excited to see how he joins the Rumble Room. So can't wait. We really hope that you all join us. There's been over 700,000 people joining us, and about 50,000 a month. So we hope that you all join us for next week. And you know what? You can follow us. And all of the addresses are all over the screen. And please consider jumping on board to the Victoria Rumble Room phenomenon. And for now, I remain your Croatian sensation, and I truly love the reference to the Modric of Sanic. My name is John Jurisic.
And I'm Robin Adair. And Christmas is coming, and rumble on.